In a world increasingly shaped by technology, the HumanUp Imperative explores the significance of human connection with each other, with the communities we serve, and perhaps most importantly, with ourselves. Join Rex Wallace and his guests as they discuss the ever-important role of authentic, meaningful connection in healthcare. It's time to Human Up.
Hey, welcome to the HumanUp Imperative, the podcast where we discuss the power of human connection. I'm your host, Rex Wallace, and today we're starting right where much of the world seems to be and where all of humanity needs us most, in the heart of conflict. My guest co-founded an organization that builds communities of peacemakers, people who really step across the lines of difference, and he equips them to reconcile conflicts that are seemingly intractable. In other words, they seem impossible to resolve, and this is where he is choosing to spend his time. And these conflicts that he works on to reconcile, they're literally all over the planet. So in a time where division feels like destiny, this conversation will be a powerful reminder that reconciliation is possible. I am really excited to human up with Todd Deatherage. So Todd, welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Rex.
So you're episode number 2. So thanks for putting your reputation on the line. I appreciate that. It's going to be good. I promise. It's going to be a good conversation. I'm really excited to have you. You're not in the space of our, most of our listeners, right? So our listeners, as I've said, are in predominantly in the healthcare space, predominantly in health plans, working in quality improvement or provider engagement or member experience. These different areas that affect things like Medicare star ratings and Medicaid quality. So that's really who we serve. And I'm excited about some of the principles that you in your organization have kind of brought to bear and focus on every day, and how those principles are going to help resolve conflict with our listeners. So yeah, maybe can we kick off with you? Just kind of let people know who is Todd Deatherage.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be here. And I do want to say, I think that the work we're doing is not, it's not been inside your industry, but I think that there are principles and practices that are applicable, that are universal and they're applicable. And I think one of the things we start with is also just remembering that a lot of us don't like conflict. I mean, some people really do enjoy conflict, but a lot of us don't like conflict, and we see conflict as a bad thing. And that's actually, conflict is not a bad thing. It's really about how we engage conflict that matters, because out of conflict, some really new realities can shape, that can come forward, that really are better than things that would have happened before. So we shouldn't just be conflict avoidant for the sake of being conflict avoidant. What we're trying to do at Telos is help people find a way to deal with conflict in a way that's constructive and that allows more sort of greater flourishing on the other side of wherever we are right now and feeling, trapped or stuck. So that's kind of a thing I'd point out to your listeners right up front. So who am I? I grew up in Arkansas down in the South, became a history major in college and taught high school for a while and got involved in politics. And I came to DC, and I worked on Capitol Hill for about 10 years and then the State Department. And then about 16 years ago, I co-founded this organization that we're talking about today, Telos, a nonprofit that works on a couple of key issues in areas of conflict. And I'm married, and I have 4 adult children and a new grandson. So those are some of the high points I'd mention.
And Todd mentioned Telos, and I'll invite you to say a little bit more about Telos in a second, but I've known Todd for a long time. I'll just put it that way. I actually went on one of Todd's tours, and Todd, I'll also invite you to kind of talk about like the work you do from a tour standpoint. So, and I'll just kind of tee it up, but Todd's organization focuses, at least part of its focus is on educating, like I said at the first, building communities of peacemakers, right? So creating community by taking people to the place of conflict and then helping you to see all sides of the conflict, right? And it's such a powerful trip. So I actually went on a trip, I think it was 9 days in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. And it's actually, I was saying a second ago, it's where I got these 2 little characters, a hug, and this was we got in Bethlehem when I was over there with Todd. So just a powerful trip, and I walked away with tons of notes. I was actually reading my notes this morning, Todd, my little binder from the Telos trip, and all the quotes from Rumi and the things that we talked about. So yeah, I'll invite you to kind of talk a little bit about that too, and some of the work that Telos does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Greg Khalil and I founded Telos back in 2009 with the idea of helping Americans better understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the American role in it. And what we were trying to do is to kind of complexify a situation that is very often is seen in very just monochromatic ways, like one side versus the other. And what we were trying to do is help people understand a little bit more nuance around that story, and also about the way America plays a role in shaping that reality there, and then help people find a way to create kind of a third way engagement around it that would allow for a recognition of the humanity of everybody there, and appreciation for the very different connections and stories that people have to that place, to learn to kind of hold those experiences in tension and those histories in tension, and then work for the things that would allow for everyone to flourish in the land, and not just kind of one against the other or one in place of the other, but for mutuality. And so that's the work we set out to do back in 2009. And the main way we set out to do that was with the trip program, like the one that you went on. And so that's really appreciative of the fact that nobody ever really gets argued into a new position about something they care about. I mean, maybe it happens, but it's pretty rare that somebody, just because they overwhelm you with facts and history and that sort of thing, that you change your mind about something that you feel strongly about. But we do change our minds, but our minds change really when our hearts change. Something touches us somewhere else outside of our rational sense. And that opens us up to seeing some things in new ways. And so we created a travel program that helps to create that kind of a space where you can have the opportunity to be opened up to seeing things differently. And so we create a very high touch, set of human experiences with Palestinians, with Israelis, with Jews, Christians, Muslims, with, kind of a variety of perspectives all throughout the land. And some of them are very mutually exclusive. So these are not just people that are talking about peace and reconciliation and living together and all that, but people from very different points of view. But just to give you an opportunity to see everyone there as human beings, and all with equal value and worth, and then out of that finding things that actually work for everyone, because the only good and lasting sustainable solution is one that works, that respects the fact that everybody there has the right to be there. And so you got to find out a way for everyone to live in that reality, in equality and justice and peace, and then ultimately in flourishing.
Yeah, when I think about, if I bring it back to our space a bit, I think the closest thing we have to sort of enhancing understanding is maybe the focus group concept or advisory group, where we have group, because we have different stakeholders, right? We have our health plan members that we're obviously serving, and they're our main customer. But then we also have our physician partners, we have our pharmacy partners, we have vendor partners, and all of our internal people. And I think I feel like the closest thing we have to really developing a way to understand those other stakeholders better are our focus groups. And it's good. It's good. I'm a big fan of them, but as someone who has gone on this trip, sort of being immersed in it, and I remember, having Shabbat with a Jewish family, and then, having a meeting with a Muslim sheikh, and then, a Palestinian Christian, and like just the different perspectives, and hearing all of them sort of in this state of immersion was something that I haven't really seen replicated, but I feel like there's a space for it, because understanding, to me, it all seems to come back to understanding, right? If we can enhance our understanding of each other, then, like you said, that's when things open up. We don't argue them into seeing our way, but if we can understand them better and meet them halfway, or make sure they feel listened to and heard, that's so important, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where listening is such an important practice of people doing this kind of work. But it's an important practice for all of us, whether or not
Yeah,
we're kind of
exactly.
doing some kind of conflict resolution work or peacemaking work. Just learning to listen better is a really key thing that we really do have to practice. Some people are better at it than others. But when we hear points of view that are very different from our own, that we disagree with, or that just are very different from our own experience, we often think we're listening when all we're doing is just formulating in our mind all the reasons like why the other person is wrong. So I mean, I can still do this all the time, and I can be
Mhm.
listening to you, but I'm just trying to come up with my best argument to explain to you why you're wrong. And if I'm really feeling charitable, I'll let you finish. And if I'm not, I may interrupt you and just tell you, no, here's where here's where you're wrong, and that's not listening. So what we're talking about is actually being curious and trying to understand how someone else got to such a different place from me on this issue that I think is really important, and they obviously do too. How did that happen? And that curiosity can take us to a whole different place. It can develop. It can help us develop empathy, which is really important. It can help humanize the other person, and really in a practical way, it can help externalize the thing that's different between us. So if we can take the thing that
Mhm.
we're not understanding each other on and in disagreement about, and not make it a personal thing between us, but like an external thing that's out here. That's what listening to understand, and someone actually who feels like they're being heard. That's what that allows to happen. So you externalize the problem or the difference, and then we've got it out almost on the table between us. And so it's not this thing in us that's
Mhm.
existential, but it's a thing between us. And then we can decide, can we compromise on this? Is this something we can figure out, or do we have to learn to live with it? But again, if it can be an external thing, it gives us a way to move on in relationship without having to make this thing feel like it's a threat, kind of, because that's often what I mean keeps us at odds, is a fear of some kind that's driving us. And so we feel like we have to be right. We feel like if we compromise on this, it's something, like there's a zero sum factor, at play often. So, so a lot that you may discover if you start trying to ask curious questions and really trying to listen and kind of figure out that the thing between us is actually not that, there's something else, because that's just, that's a substitute for something that's a little deeper. Again, it's usually some kind of fear that's back there, and maybe even a trauma that's back there. And
Exactly.
all that is, again, very applicable in just how we live in the world.
How do you go about picking the conflicts that the organization's focused on? I mean, Israel Palestine, that one's pretty big. It's been going on for a little while, right? I mean, you can't
Yes.
get much bigger than that, I feel like. But I know some of your other ones, and they all feel so big. But how do you go about picking those? And,
Well, our mission statement at Telos is that we form communities of American peacemakers to help, bridge these differences, or to address intractable conflict at home and abroad. And we started off just with the America's relationship to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict,
Mhm.
and that's a bold mission. We're actually not trying to solve that conflict as much as we're trying to help Americans understand it and understand our role in it and redirect our interventions, because we really intervene a lot. We spend a lot of our resources in both diplomatic, military, political, shape, and theological, in shaping that reality. So that was the big
And
thing we
I
set
have
out
to
to
think
work on.
sorry. I have to think you're pretty busy today, right?
It's really been a horrific time the last 19 months. Yeah,
Yeah,
since the October 7th, 2023, it's really been an awful, awful time for the people there. I
yeah, yeah.
mean, least of all for us, but it's certainly made our work incredibly challenging, but also even in some ways more important than ever, as well, as we are arguing for the mutuality of everyone there. Violence begets violence begets violence. That's one of our principles of peacemaking. And so trying to argue for a ceasefire and hostage release and humanitarian aid delivery, which is we've been doing out of our our practice of advocacy, which is one of the things that we do in peacemaking. So all those things have really been very, very distressful to us. But that's the work we set out to do in the beginning. And after exposing people to this for a number of years, we had a lot of people who wanted to make other applications of this work at home and in their own communities here in the U.S. And so that took us into an expansion of our mission statement to be broader than just one issue and to be about the work of peacemaking. And the second application we make of that is around our own American story and some of the long-standing issues of racial injustice in America, and helping just to tell a more honest story, and not to just beat ourselves up, but so that we can honestly understand how we got to where we are and the legacies of our racialized past and the way that they still play out. And so that we can identify the work of repair and healing that we still need to do, and that as a way to make our country a better place for greater human flourishing. So that's the other kind of key issue area. We also have immersive travel programs in South Africa and in Northern Ireland, where we can kind of look at peacemaking and conflict resolution, political agreements, reconciliation work that's done, to get out of a conflict and to kind of get sort of what would be seen as post-conflict and those realities, and what worked and what didn't, and what we can learn from those situations. Not so much trying to help, be involved in those issues, but learning from those stories and trying to take those lessons and bring them into the work that we do here at home.
You've alluded to some of the principles. Can you kind of recap? So your mission is to educate really Americans on some of these conflicts, and how can we understand it better? How can we understand the role that we play, and the pluses and minuses of that? I know, but what are some of those principles? And by the way, I feel like my bookshelf is partly yours. I feel like, because you talked about the American conflict. So Todd recommended this book to me, and it's amazing. It's one of the best books I've read for sure. So about the plight of slavery in America and some of the plantations and the bad things that happened. I learned a lot about Juneteenth that I just celebrated here in Houston last week. So and I'll invite you later to recommend a book that everyone should read, by the way, heads up. So go ahead.
All right. Well, we have 6 principles and 6 practices. If you want to, if anybody, if any of your listeners want to go deeper in that, you can go to our website, telosgroup.org, and you can find them all there. But the principles are things like growth. You just start with the idea that change is possible, because when we're in a moment like this where the world seems on fire, it's easy to just imagine that everything's stuck and nothing's gonna get better. And that can be in the kind of macro, or it can just be in situations we're dealing with in our workplace, in our in our community, that sort of thing too. But you can feel like that there's just that nothing's ever going to change. Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to kind of root yourself. You have to really decide what you believe about the world. Do we live in a deterministic universe? Is it all fated to just be like this? Or do we have some agency, and do we bring change into the world in the way that we live? And again, in great and small ways. And is change possible? And the first principle that we believe of peacemaking is that change is possible. We take the world as it is, but we appreciate the fact that we all make a difference in some way in the world that we live in and in our time. And again, we're not all global leaders and world changers, but we all do bring difference into the reality of our daily lives, our families, our workplaces, our communities. And so you'd root yourself in that notion that change is possible. I think cynicism is often where people fall in a dark time, but it's kind of a cheap emotion because it just kind of absolves you of any responsibility to try to live differently. But what we found in looking at conflict resolution is that when people choose to live differently, it opens up an opportunity. It creates a new imagination for doing something different. And it doesn't always work every time, and it's frustrating, but like the idea that people choose to respond, not in kind sometimes, like people sometimes choose to forgive when they don't really, there's no justification for forgiveness. They choose to do something different than what's expected. And when people act differently, sometimes that opens up, it's a very disruptive kind of thing that can open up the possibility for change. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons that change can happen, but it does. And we need to be reminded that in our own story, in our own lives, there are examples of trajectories of change There are historical examples that we need to remind ourselves of as well. So that's the first principle. I don't need to go through all of it in great detail because that would be a whole episode. But things like equity, which is a little bit different than equality. Understanding equity and how we need to make sure that everyone not just has a place at the table, but is seen as an equal shareholder in the communities we're trying to build. Justice, you can't separate peace and justice. The kind of peaceful world we want to live in has to be also built on a foundation of justice. Dr. Martin Luther King said that true peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of justice. And so that's a really central part of conflict resolution. Relationship, true peacemaking is really done best in the context of some kind of relationship and an appreciation for the importance of being in right relationship. Is a very difficult thing, but that's kind of the glue that holds a peaceful relationship or society together is the relationship. And it's important for us to remember to cultivate diverse sets of relationships in our own lives, to really have honest relationships with people that are different from us in a lot of different ways. That's a helpful thing because it reminds us that no matter what I think about this issue, I have to think about how it affects this person, right? So whatever the issue is, and I won't go into a lot of examples, but but just always filtering how we respond to certain things through the lived experience of other people, and if we don't have relationships outside of the people that are just like us, we just won't be able to do that, effectively. Nonviolence is a key principle of peacemaking, and the final principle that we really believe is so central is a vision of mutuality, a vision of mutual flourishing. And some people would call this in the kind of business world or self-help world just the win-win mentality, but the idea of trying to create realities in which there aren't this sort of zero-sum scarcity mindset idea of just winners and losers, but actual mutuality where we all flourish better when we do this kind of thing together and we go through this process together. So those are the 6 principles, and we could also walk through the practices if you want to.
Yeah. Before we go to the practices, though, a couple of things that jump out at me. One, so equity. That's such an important one. It's that is an important concept in our space. There's a focus on health equity, right? Where we are trying to be more focused on members who have historically been underserved, vulnerable populations. Sometimes the system is actually set up to, it's actually systemic oppression, right? So actually the whole healthcare system is sort of set up to fail these people. There's been a move to focus more on that. It was becoming under Biden an important part of some of the quality improvement programs where we're incented to focus on health equity, but then that seems to be going away now with the new administration. So a lot of our clients, a lot of the people listening, I think are in this constant tension right now of should I focus on that or not? I think everyone knows it's the right thing to do, but they have to prioritize things too, right? And should they prioritize other things that are going to help them achieve higher scores and potentially get more revenue that will help them serve all members better? I think that's the tension that a lot of clients will. I don't know if you have a perspective on that, but I think that equity concept is, we definitely encourage our clients absolutely focus on health equity, right? Like those are the members that need the help most. Those are historically the members who are going to be most non-compliant for some of these measures anyway. So there is really no downside. There's only upside for especially that member for us to give them more attention than they've historically gotten.
Yeah, no, I mean, equity is really, it's a buzzword right now that is in disfavor in a lot of very official circles, and people are having to scrub it out of their mission statements and having to really to address that kind of critique. I still think it's a very central principle if you're imagining a world in which people can all flourish. You've got to deal with historical inequities. There's just no way around that if you're really trying to create a world of mutual flourishing. In our work, one of the little examples we give, and this may not be that helpful because everybody that's listening might already be convinced of this kind of thing, but but if you look at a kind of our long history, which is, these inequitable outcomes and realities and systemic challenges you're talking about in the healthcare industry are the legacies of a long history that didn't just happen. This is
Right.
this is all a legacy of something that's gone on for a long time. One of the examples we use, and I get this from a friend of mine named David Bailey, who does racial reconciliation work in Richmond, Virginia. But it's just imagine that there's a group of people. There's like 10 of us in the room, and we're going to play Monopoly. We all know how to play Monopoly, but 5 of us start the game, and we spend an hour together playing the game before the other 5 get in. And so when the other 5 come in second, technically, the rules are the same. We have an equal and level playing field, if you will. But the first 5 have already been going around the board for an hour together, and some of them have hotels, and some of them, like they've figured out how to work together, or who's a little dodgy and you can't really trust, or but like they've created a culture and they understand each other. And then these new folks kind of get in the game, and they start going around the board, and then somebody lands on Park Place and there's a hotel there, and then like they're kind of done for right off the bat.
Right.
And the example of that is just like there's a lot of inequity that is built into our system. So yes, in our long American story, we have 350 years of absolute and total racialized inequality built into our legal system. 250 years of enslavement, 100 years of
Right.
of Jim Crow and other kinds of discriminatory laws. It's not until the mid 1960s with the Civil Rights Law and the Voting Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act in 1968 that we start to get even a legal playing field that's level. But we've got 350 years of kind of an inequitable situation of it. And so just remembering those things, reminding ourselves that, and so to do that work of making the world more equitable is just doing nothing but like trying to like deal with, kind of historical legacies that still manifest themselves in ways that just don't allow for everyone to flourish in the same way. And if that's the goal, is to create mutual flourishing for all, then this is a core thing that we have to find ways to address. And in a moment like this, maybe we have to be really creative about how we do that, because again, it's a word that is really, under threat or under attack, but also often just misunderstood. People don't actually always know what you're talking about. And so finding other ways to talk about it and still work on it is really critical if you're trying to get to mutuality.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Changing the names were something that's not polarizing, right? And or at least referring to it as something that's not so polarizing. Agree. Yeah, jump into the practices.
Yeah, I mean, the first is listening to understand, and we talked about that one already, but just, that really is one that we can practice in our daily lives, and it does build empathy and curiosity. And if we can all become a little bit more curious and a little more empathetic and a little less judgmental, and, like there's no downside to that. That's going to help us navigate the mess that we're living in right now. And you can use that in your own life in all sorts of ways. It's just that reminder that to take the world as it is, not as you want it to be, and to really understand how it is, you just have to listen. You have to listen to some things maybe you don't want to hear, and that's okay. And don't be threatened by that, and don't just lean in.
Before you move on, because that triggers a lot of things in my head. But real quick, so we have a team of 13 people, right, in our organization. We use I'll put a plug for Predictive Index, right? So it's a behavioral and cognitive testing platform that helps us understand each other better. So the whole reason we started using it in the first place was because even our small team was having some challenges communicating with each other. So we started, we leveraged a consultant to basically help us. We all took these tests. We understood, where do we fall on the control spectrum or patient spectrum, or right, how dominating are we, or how extroverted versus introverted, and just it helped us really understand each other.
Yeah.
And some of us that were having challenges, I think understanding and communicating with each other and taking things too personally, it helped a lot, right? Just to see who this other person really is. I think it's a practical example of exactly what you're talking about, right? But understanding each other in our world, whether it's understanding I think especially with the people that we're working with on a daily basis, or our boss, who sometimes that relationship drives, almost entirely our satisfaction at work sometimes, right? So
Yep.
the more we can understand that person and vice versa, we may not change, but we will see things differently and be able to not respond like we did before, right? So
That's
yeah,
right.
I
That's
think
right. Yeah,
listen.
it just humanizes people. And when people feel heard and understood, it just lowers the temperature. So
Exactly.
the issue may still be there, and it may be unresolvable, and that's okay sometimes, right? But if we can just learn to humanize each other, then we create a space in which other things can happen, and we do create a better opportunity to fix the problem. And again, nurturing just the nurturing empathy and curiosity is never a bad thing, and creating self-awareness in our own selves is never a bad thing. So yes.
Okay. All right. Number two.
Well, a second practice is learning to hold different truths in tension, and two things can be true at the same time. It's a fact. And so there's a physicist named Niels Bohr who says the opposite of a fact is a falsehood. But the opposite of one profound truth may be another profound truth. And I think we live in a very post-truth era in which all things are called into question. And I do think that we need to defend truth, and there are things that are true and things that are false.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that two truths can be held together and then sound opposite, but just need to be held in tension with each other. And so my story is not the only story, but there are other stories that I need to listen to and understand. And then I need to understand that we can all have different experiences of the same reality. And so that's another way to kind of think about it, that we can each have a shared experience, but it worked out differently for both of us. And so we both have a different way of understanding what this is all about. And that's okay. And just learning to, kind of hold those things in tension is a key practice if, when we're trying to do conflict resolution.
Yeah, that's the thing with the trip that I took with you, right? That's the thing I came back with, and I remember I wrote an article on LinkedIn about it, and that was the thing that jumped out at me the most was this perspective, or this truth, this fact that the truth isn't necessarily in the middle always, or they're both true, right? They're both felt experiences, right. And that was so important for me. And I just read on Juneteenth the book, and I forget the author's name, but she talked about when you're studying history, like you have to understand the parallel perspectives, right? The different perspectives that were at the same time, but from two different parties. And she was talking about slavery, slave owners versus enslaved people. But yeah, it's so important in any conflict to understand that.
Yeah, no, my ancestors came to Culpeper County, Fauquier County, Virginia, in the late 1600s from England. And there were Africans who were brought to that same county the same time as my ancestors, under very, very different conditions. And as their descendants, each of us have an experience of America and then an American story that are equally true, but can be equally true, but can also sound very different, right? Because we've just had very different experiences of a shared history. And again, that's true in that kind of big, larger, macro way in terms of our own American story. It's true in daily lives too. This also comes out of there's a kind of a South Asian proverb that I have loved to use to help people understand this concept too. But there's this story of 5 blind men walking around in the jungle, and they encounter this big obstacle in their path, and they each start trying to figure out what it is, and so they all each start describing something that sounds very different that they think they've stumbled on, and it's not until they put all these pieces together that they realize they found an elephant, right?
Yeah.
But no one of them could figure this out without understanding that this thing I'm holding on to, and it sounds very true, like is also has to be held in tension with this other thing, and then there's a larger truth that emerges out of that.
Right. Yeah, I've heard the trunk versus the leg versus the ear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways that you can get at this to help people understand that it makes sense, but it really is just a critical thing to do. That my experience, can be very different than yours. That this truth may be very different than that truth. It's not to say that truth is relative or there's no such thing as something that's objectively true, but it's just to say that if you're really going to do conflict resolution, you have to understand people's experiences and how they got here, and And again, that kind of surfaces as you learn to listen better,
Mm-hmm.
and you listen for there's usually there's something deeper inside us that has formed us and shaped us in a way. And so sometimes that's what's driving the difference in the conflict and and we have to kind of empathetically learn to listen to those kinds of stories.
I think about an example coming up. We're here in late June, so it's almost July 4th. Juneteenth was last week. Juneteenth is Freedom Day, right? Many black people claim, that is their Freedom Day. July 4th is coming up, Independence Day, but it wasn't independence for everyone, right? It was independence for the white people who were here at that time. So many black people don't celebrate July 4th. And I think I'm pointing at myself, right? White people, we need to understand that. And I think about our health plan members, our health plans, our clients are serving a lot of elderly and disabled members. And many of those elderly, especially, I'm imagining a lot of elderly Black members in our country, we need to be aware of that, right? Like, I think we need to be sensitive to that and just give them space for that. I don't know. That's
right.
Comes to
Totally.
mind.
Absolutely. Yep. Two things can be true at once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Just a couple other quick practices are like we talk about in the kind of conflict resolution we do, centering the leadership of the people on the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And what that can really look like is just you use the word getting close to something or getting proximate to where the problem is, and listening to the people that are most affected by it gives you the insight that you often need in order to try to figure out how you can be helpful. And so that's what we're really talking about is centering the leadership of folks that are most affected by the problem you're trying to solve, and not coming in with your kind of mentality that you're going to come in with your superior wisdom and fix a problem that you are not adjacent to. And so that's an important practice in a lot of conflict resolution. Another practice is you're going to center the leadership of folks on the margin, but then you're going to use your position, whatever power, position, privilege you have, to be an advocate for something that's better. So you're going to use your own agency. Again, we all bring change into the world, and so we all have responsibility to act on things that we know. And sometimes we have a voice that we can use, that others we have platforms, we have access to communities, we have access to power that maybe others don't. And so we listen to those folks in the margins, but then we are using our own voices to try to advocate for again a more just and flourishing world for everyone, and including those people who don't have access. Everybody has a voice, but not every voice has equal access to being heard. And so sometimes that's our work, just to do that. So those are a couple more of the principles, and then practices. And then the two final ones are just the importance of self-interrogation. And that can look like a lot of things. In communal conflict, it can look like, how do people like me help create this or benefit from this reality? What's our part in this? But in any kind of conflict situation, interpersonal or otherwise, starting with ourselves is really important. So we always talk about how peacemaking is both an internal and an external exercise. And the internal part of that is doing the work of self-interrogation. So if you think about, like my ability to change somebody else is about zero, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, my only real opportunity is to try to deal with my own stuff and bring change, in my own life. And so the more I can be honest about how I'm not living up to my own values, my own hypocrisies, my own, the things I'm doing, that's my best play. And it also works out communally. Like, I live in Washington, D.C. I worked on the Hill for a long time. In politics today, which is completely the opposite of all the things that we teach, right? To be honest with you. But in politics today, if I'm a Republican, it's easy to blame Democrats all day long for the bad things that I think they're doing. Yeah. And my ability as a Republican to bring about any kind of change in democratic behavior is really zero. In fact, it might be minus zero, because maybe my speaking out makes it worse, right? Makes them more double down on what they're doing, whatever. But my best ability to bring change is to make sure I'm being as healthy as I can be, and that my team, my community, my political tribe is holding itself to its own values and trying to be, not be hypocritical and to live out what we're trying to do and do it in a generative way. And, and like, that's my play. So that's what self-interrogation is about. So it's about doing your own work, rather than trying to change the person that is your adversary, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a colleague.
Right.
Like, our ability to change other people is really limited, and we just need to be honest about that. It's not to say that sometimes people don't need to change. They, if they're doing bad things, they need to change their behavior. But just being appreciative of that, my most important work sometimes is to make myself healthier. And if I do that, then that may create a space in which there's an opportunity for a different kind of relationship, a different kind of conversation, a different way, and somebody else may also change as a result. Our own transformation actually creates a space for others to be transformed as well.
Right. What was it? This is actually one of the quotes I had in my binder from the trip. But was it Rumi that said something like, "When I was young, I wanted to change the world, but when I became more wise, I decided I just need to change myself." Something like that, right?
Yeah, that's pretty direct. That's a good quote of Rumi's. Yeah, Rumi has a lot of wisdom. He also said at some point, beyond right and wrong, there's a field. I'll meet you there.
Exactly.
And sometimes we really get hung up on the need to be right.
Yeah.
And being right can feel good, but it can also, sometimes it's important if sometimes things are right and wrong, and you need to stand for what's right, but that's not the only goal, is just to be right. And sometimes it's more important to move to something different, and we don't always have to be right. And that's a hard thing for some of us to let go of, but the more we can do that, the more we create space for new realities as well.
Yeah. And I think a couple things. One, you mentioned earlier, but when you talked about, when we sort of depersonalize something and make it something on its own out in front of us, it's not us, then we can address it in a different way. And just speaking politically, like, I see so many people, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes, though I've tried to be much more aware of it, like not criticizing people, not criticizing one party versus another, or voters, or even sometimes criticizing the person who is the political person making the decisions, but instead bring light to the fallacies of the decision or the policy, or right,
right.
and depersonalize it.
That's right.
That helps so much in increasing understanding. And also, I would say, in what you said about, we need to look inwards, right? I think many people in our industry, and probably every industry, they find themselves unable to do that because of their calendar. They have zero time throughout a day to reflect on anything. They're not in solitude for 30 seconds, right? They're not in silence for 30 seconds. They're on back-to-back Teams and Zoom calls from one meeting to the next, making decisions, or at least participating. And I encourage clients to carve out time, create space for you to think and be creative and just reflect, not necessarily like meditate or whatever, but it's the same concept, right? Just be quiet and reflect on yourself, right? Because if you can't change yourself, you're not going to change anyone, right?
Yeah. If we're not healthy, we're going to spew that lack of health into the world around us, right? I mean,
right.
And so it is really important that leaders in all different, sectors appreciate the importance of nurturing their own souls and their own health, so that they can be generative forces in the world. Hurt people, as they say, and healed people bring healing in the world. So just being willing to deal with our own stuff is, it's way more fun to criticize somebody else's, than, point out their flaws, than to deal with your own stuff. That's not fun work to do. But if I don't do my work, I make you do more. It's like, if I'm not doing my stuff, if you're an employer and you're not doing your internal work, you're going to make your employees do the work that you should be doing. That they're going to have to pay the price for your lack of doing your own stuff.
Were there more practices, or that was all of them?
The last one is advocacy, and again,
Okay.
that's really important in the kind of the larger work that we do, is that we use our voices. But it can, that can work that way in the workplace too. Sometimes we have to, based on all the other things we've talked about, we have to be an advocate for a world that is more just and whole, and we have to use those voices and be willing sometimes to even pay a price for using those voices. Sometimes we want to jump to that. I mean, these are not linear, and so I don't mean to say that there's an order about them, but sometimes we just want to be an advocate. We want to be these people screaming about injustice, and we want the world to be more just, and we want, and we do that. And that's like, we need those voices to remind us of things that that are unjust and unfair in the world. But we need to best do that out of these other things as well, out of right relationship, out of some of this, having listened, having done our own self-interrogation. That makes us a much better advocate for, for a world that's truly more just and fair. Because sometimes we want the system to be more just, but we really want it to be more just for us, right? Justice is for just us, right?
Right.
And so justice can actually be a politicized concept that, like, what's a justice for me might be an injustice for you. And so we have to deal with kind of an approximate nature to these things. So all that can better be understood in our advocacy if we've done some of the other stuff that we've talked about as well.
Yeah, then that's actually a big word for, our industry too, and definitely with us and our clients. We have a relationship with a firm in DC now, a policy firm, Indigo Hill Strategies, where they help us and our clients understand all the policy changes, but also how to advocate. And I think to what you just said, that exists a lot, where plans will advocate or push back sometimes only for those things that influence them directly in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
Or to push back in a way that it would affect them positively. So, but I think to really understand how it impacts their members is really the key, right? So, anyway, advocacy is something that it's an important one, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
In these last few minutes, maybe I'll do rapid fire because I had a few questions I wanted to hit you with, if that's okay. Is it okay?
Yeah.
So, well, I guess were you a peacemaker as a child? You're this global peacemaker guy now, I feel like, right? So.
It's a good question. I have no stories that I can think of that foreshadow, doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
I think for me, the seminal moments were when I got to Capitol Hill in my late 20s and early 30s, and I had to navigate that reality, which, and I really just saw that I had this, like, frustration with how partisan it was and how only good ideas could come from your tribe, there was just so little space. And so I just felt really frustrated by that inability to kind of find some common good things to work on. And that was also part of a kind of a spiritual journey I was on at the time, a faith journey that was taking me into kind of a deeper place that made me kind of want to work for a common good, for all. Anyway, so that it was probably the Capitol Hill experience more than anything else that really gave me an opportunity to kind of figure out what I really thought about this stuff and then have to live it out.
Gotcha. Okay. What is one book you would encourage everyone to read?
I know you're a big reader. Book is like asking me to name my favorite child. I can't do that. There's no one for everybody, but I don't read self-help books very often, so I can't really recommend those kind of books that probably would be most applicable for this. So I would probably choose a couple of novels. I think fiction is underrated for fueling our imagination to see the world differently and live in it. We can be kind of preached to in a self-help book, and that can be really useful at times. But sometimes we need to be opened up, and a story can actually help us open up and to see things differently. Paragon by Colin McCann is a beautiful book. Apeirogon. If anybody wants to write that down and look it up on. And I think just some of the classics like Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. It's a doorstop of a book, so it's a commitment. It's 1,000 pages long in most forms, but it's really worth it. There's a slim little novel by an Irish writer that's more recent called Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I really love that book. So those are some of the novels I'd recommend, and I could give you others. You mentioned Clint Smith's book and all that, but I won't do that. But I can't do one. The one is way too hard.
That's great. No, three works.
All right. All right.
Okay, then let's do last question, actually. How would you finish this sentence? For me, one of the most important ways to human up is to...
I'd say give people the benefit of the doubt as a starting point. Just start by assuming good intention. Some people will definitely prove you wrong, and that's okay. But the more we can assume good intentions by our colleagues, by our family members, the better starting point that allows for us. And even when they prove us wrong, it's still better for our own soul. I think to have made the assumption that that they were trying to do the right thing, even if it's really badly executed. So giving people the benefit of the doubt, I think, is an important. It's certainly in my own nonprofit. It's something that we have very intentionally, talked about and tried to make part of our culture. Is that whenever somebody comes in hot with something else, that the first response should always be to try to assume that they're doing it for all the right reasons, and so we have to figure out what that is. But just starting with that assumption is a way to build a better office culture for sure. And in the home environment, I think it works the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. How can people, if people want to learn more about Telos or about you, how would they do that?
Yeah, go to telosgroup.org. We have a couple of podcast channels of our own. One is called Undaunted. It's a couple seasons of stories of peacemakers from around the world, particularly Israel, Palestine, but other places like South Africa and the American South and other parts of the world. We also have a regular podcast called The Check-In, or irregular. It's every few weeks, but it's like taking some of the contemporary issues of the day and using a peacemaker's lens to analyze them, particularly on the issues that we work on around Israel, Palestine, and racial justice. Those are the areas that we mostly focus on. And we have a newsletter, so there's all sorts of ways to engage with us through the website. You can follow us on Instagram. That's where we post most of our social media communications. And yeah, we'd love for people to check us out.
Yeah, and you do these American South trips, right? Through Alabama, Mississippi, I don't know where all, but you kind of follow MLK's steps.
Well, we start in New Orleans so that we can kind of go to origin stories. We engage the Native American community in the South of Louisiana. We visit a plantation that tells kind of an honest story of what the plantation system was all about, both as as a brutal kind of slave labor camp, but as a foundation for the generation of wealth, both in the South and the North. And we move through kind of the longer American history, including the Civil Rights Movement in Jackson, Mississippi, Selma, Alabama, and Montgomery. We look at some contemporary issues that are manifestations of all this. We look at some people doing some really amazing work to bring healing and repair into their communities around all of this. So it's a rich and powerful experience. Yeah, it's 7 days in the American South.
I've not been on it yet, but it's on my list. I will definitely be going at some point soon.
You are welcome.
And, maybe we'll schedule a healthcare trip, right?
We'd love to bring cohorts of people that have things in common. These are great leadership development opportunities as well. So, a group of 12 or 15 folks from the same sector who wanted to do an immersive experience together. Yeah. It really does help you understand complexity and nuance and how to engage these kind of complex problems in a really thoughtful way.
Especially for plans that have members in the South, I think this would be a great way to understand their membership better, right? Okay, Todd, I know we're at time, so thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, great to have you. So thanks everyone for listening. That's episode 2. Thanks for tuning in, and please continue to human up with us in the future. Thanks, everyone.
We all know quality isn't optional. Success in Medicare Advantage and Medicaid demands relentless focus, using data, engaging providers, elevating member experience, and embedding quality in your culture. At RWC, quality is our DNA. Our clients outperform the industry, and our Net Promoter Score of 94 says it all. Whether you're aiming for 4 stars or exceeding Medicaid benchmarks, redefining success in Medicare and Medicaid begins with RWC, because we catalyze cultures of quality.